Hello, welcome back to Take Your Medicine. My name is Sadie.
And my name is Jacob.
And today we thought we'd start with saying, okay, groomer.
The groomers are back at it.
Because the groomers haven't stopped.
They're still at it.
The roaches are still scattering. So this is from the Post-Millennial, this first story we have. And Disney, to assist employees in obtaining genital mutilation, cross-sex hormones for minor children.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, this, of course, is coming in response to the parental rights bill in Florida. Disney's Walt Disney World is located in Florida, so they're having a lot of backlash from their trans employees. That is like 10 of them.
No, it's probably more.
It probably is more. I mean, there was that video. Did we show that video last week?
Of the board meeting?
Yeah.
No, we didn't. We talked about it, but...
The Chris Rufo video.
Yeah, it's probably... I mean, if I had to guess, I'd guess 100% of the Disney employees are gay!
Probably. But there was that video that had been obtained by Chris Rufo. It was circulating. It was viral. It was the exec meeting where one executive producer said, "My not-so-secret gay agenda." And now Disney is going to allow their employees and their employees' children to obtain what they call gender-affirming surgeries.
Yes, which includes genital mutilation, which, by the way, I'm like old enough to remember when fundamentalist Muslims were doing genital mutilation in the Middle East, and everyone was like...
They still do.
Oh, I know, but everyone was like, oh my goodness, how can they do this? And now we're doing it to our own children. So
voluntarily,
it's like...
yeah. So it's the same. But I wanted to talk about this headline in conjunction with a segment that Brian Stelter did on CNN, because I wanted to highlight how propaganda gets peddled.
Okay.
So there was a segment that's about an 8-minute segment that CNN had Brian Stelter do, talking about this video of this exec meeting Zoom call that Chris Rufo exposed. He was talking about that video, and he was trying to say, conservatives are scared of the Walt Disney Company. And I just wanted to show the part where he mentions the video, but is dishonest about it.
Okay, so we're playing this?
We're playing this.
All right, here we go.
Status. In the past week, Fox News has talked about Disney hundreds and hundreds of times. And the mentions really ticked up after the same conservative activist who hyped concerns about critical race theory last year shared a leaked video of Disney executives talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was deemed scandalous that some producers at Disney want to include more LGBTQ characters and storylines in shows. So this is the leaked video. It became this very hot topic in right-wing media. But I want you to remember, Disney is one of the largest companies in the entire world, with nearly 200,000 employees and lots of different opinions. But suddenly, the opinions of these employees on an internal video call were treated like breaking news on Fox and other networks. The overarching narrative was all about left-wing gender ideology going too far, endangering kids.
Okay, so you said to stop at 3:02, so we're past that point. So,
yeah.
I mean, first thoughts is obviously he's not playing any of the audio from the internal.
Right.
He's got subtitles on the internal videos, but then the videos are also being cut by CNN to exclude. They actually did include a part where the woman was saying that every chance I could, I'm adding queerness.
And her not-so-secret gay agenda.
Right, but they didn't play the audio, so you're listening to just Brian Stelter there, the Mr. Potato Head. But then also... What he doesn't do is he doesn't mention specifically what roles these people have. A lot of these people are in charge of writing the stories.
Right.
Does he think that like Bob Chapek, the CEO, sits down and writes all the stories so all the peon employees can go and do it? No.
Right.
There are people in charge at this meeting of actually creating the stories and the characters. And those are the people saying, we're injecting the gay agenda into this. They literally said that.
To be fair, at the beginning of the segment, he said the video was Disney execs, but again, he never said what their role as execs was. An executive producer who oversees the story writing, that's an important role. And yes, they have thousands and thousands of employees, but it doesn't matter if they have no power.
Right.
The people who have power is who's important.
Right.
So yes, it's big news. It's important when like the top 5 writers in the whole company or whatever are on a call and talking about their not so secret gay agenda.
Right.
But the audio part was really, that is really misleading, I think, because if you just have the news on in the background and you're listening to him talk, you're probably not going to poke your head in to see what video he's talking about. Right. And even when I did watch it, but I watched it on my phone and I couldn't see on my phone screen that the subtitles were on that video that he was talking about. Yeah. So it's very misleading. It's very propagandizing, and it just, groomer. I don't know what else to say.
This is a classic technique of the news propaganda generally, is that here's what I would propose to any of the viewers. I probably am preaching to the choir, but when you see a CNN story or any other story that's reporting on some source material, like a video or an image or something, and they don't link to the video in its entirety, you're being propagandized. This is exactly what Brian Stelter's doing. He's doing a report, an opinion piece on a piece of media, on a video that was leaked, and he's not covering it in its entirety.
Right.
He's saying, oh, the video, he's telling the NPCs, the video exists. Here's what you should think about the video. Moving on.
Right.
The news media, if they wanted you to be informed, they'd say, this piece of media exists. You can find it here on our website in its entirety. Go and watch it. And here's our analysis of it. But they don't do that. They get in front of it and they say, this thing exists. Here's what you think. Move on. That's all they do.
Yeah.
They don't. If they do not link to the source material when it's publicly available, they are propagandizing you. Full stop. That's the only way you can interpret it. You know, and that's not a problem with right-wing websites. Post-millennial links to the source videos all the time when they report on things.
Well, I don't know that they would consider themselves right-wing so much as populist and actual bastions of free thought. I guess and
my point
true journalism, but
independent outlets will offer up the primary source material in its entirety for you to watch.
Right.
You know, they did this with the Nick Sandmann video too. They said, here's the video of him being racist against a Native American man. They never linked to where they found the video at all. And you know, part of me is like, the charitable interpretation is, oh, well, they're just arrogant and they think that they can pull out the best, you know, the most relevant pieces of the information. But it's just, obviously it always cuts in one direction, and it's just it's hard to be charitable when they repeatedly do this.
Well, and even when I first watched this, I started to hear him queuing up the video or whatever, and he said, here's the video, and I almost went, oh my gosh, he's actually going to play the video. And then he just kept talking and there was no audio, and I was like, oh, that's tricky. That's really sneaky. And I did not approve of that. But I think it's important to highlight that tactic, because especially something like grooming children, it's so important that you have all of the facts. And now, after this CNN segment, Disney now came out, I think yesterday or the day before, with this new, what they're calling a healthcare policy.
Okay.
So the Post-Millennial reports the company has come under fire.
Editor.
Recently come under fire for Disney executive producer LaToya Raveno saying in one of these company-wide meetings that she has been actively adding a political message to the products she has worked on. So if you only watch the CNN video, this is the transcript of what she said in the audio.
All right, here we go.
Quote, on my little pocket of Proud Family Disney TVA, the showrunners were super welcoming. Meredith Roberts and our leadership over there has been so welcoming to my not at all secret gay agenda. So, I felt like maybe it was that way in the past, but I guess something must have happened in the last. They were turning it around, they're going hard, and then all that momentum that I felt, like that sense of I don't have to be afraid to have these two characters kiss, ellipses, like I was just wherever I could, just basically adding queerness to if you see anything queer in the show, no one would stop me, and no one was trying to stop me, end quote, she said. So that's what was said in the video that was leaked, that CNN reported on, but was not truthful about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, how do you get much clearer than that? It's an admission of what they're doing, and it's not even like an admission like you pull teeth for admissions and confessions and stuff. No, she is proudly displaying the fact that she is exposing children to this gender ideology.
In an internal meeting,
and she's adding queerness whenever she can, whenever she has the opportunity, which means that, well, number one, that means that they're not focused on the story. They're focused on the agenda above all else. Because if you're writing a story, right, your focus is, how do I tell a good story, and what characters do I need to introduce with what characteristics to make that story shine? That's how you should approach story writing, I'm assuming. I mean,
Right.
but they're approaching story writing as a vehicle for delivering their political message.
Well, and if you were writing a story that required gay characters to do that very thing, where you are trying to tell a very specific story from a specific lens, that'd be one thing if you were adding gay characters for that purpose.
Right.
But if it doesn't add to the story, it's kind of pointless.
Yeah. Like, what's that movie with Tom Hanks where during the AIDS crisis it's called Stone
Oh,
something?
I don't... Stonewall?
No, no, I don't know. But
I don't know.
there was that, it was a movie with Tom Hanks about
Right.
the AIDS epidemic. Like, obviously, you need gay characters in
Right.
that to tell that story effectively.
Right. Or if you're trying to tell a story about, like, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
He was a gay man, a young gay man. So if you're making another character in a movie about him also gay to show that that was his sexual interest or whatever, that's important to character development and storyline and explaining
Right.
how he got to where he got. But it wasn't, let's make him gay just because. I mean, he was a real person. But if that had been a fictional story, it's not like you're just doing it just to do
Well,
it.
the really pernicious thing is I feel like if you were to, let's say, make Jeffrey Dahmer as a fictional story and you made him gay, you'd probably be bigoted.
Right, because it's like, how
you're
dare
portraying-
you?
Yeah.
You made a gay person into a cannibal and a murderer, and
Yeah.
gay people aren't like that. But that's not the point. The
Right.
point is that his victims were young men because that was where his sexual attraction lied.
Right, yeah,
He had
so-
other problems too, but yeah, if you were actually focused on story writing, maybe there would be a spot for gay characters or trans characters if the story called for it.
Right.
But if you're just adding them in anywhere, and the other part, when they're welcoming about it, that's a little freaky because no one's trying to stop you, which means that most people in the company, if we're going off of that sample size of that team for that show, most of the company is in support of this not so secret gay agenda.
Right.
If they're welcoming of it, it's not even like they had some qualms but just kept their mouth shut.
They were, yeah.
They were eager to let you throw in your queerness or whatever.
Further disproves the narrative like, oh, it's a few executives. No, if it's somebody going to the executives with the idea and they're like, that's great, we're going to do that.
Exactly.
It's like, okay, so it's a few executives, maybe I'll grant you that, but the executives are fully on board with it. So it's like,
Well,
does
they're
it
fully
matter?
on board with it, and if they say, yes, we're doing it, all of their underlings have to do it.
Right.
Or quit.
Yeah.
So,
Did
yes,
you
it's some executives, but it's like...
Did you see those protests that were happening at Disney in Florida?
Yes.
Like, there were some, I don't like using the term cast members, so I'm not going to use that. There were some Disney employees who are conservative who are
Yes,
there
I saw
protesting.
that was
And-
really great.
And that's the other point. It's like, they're running with this agenda and they are alienating a subset of their employees. They're certainly alienating a subset of the audience, right?
Right.
You got the Daily Wire coming out with kids shows, which is like a necessary response to
Right.
Disney's wokeism, but you're also alienating the good people that work for you. The people who
Yeah.
still believe that no, children shouldn't be exposed to this sort of ideology.
Right.
And I hope it's self-destructive. I
mean,
think it's self-destructive.
It's good that the more conservative, or at least the more reasonable employees of the company that don't want to expose children to weird sex stuff, because they don't have to be conservative to disagree with that agenda.
That's true.
I think it's good that they're protesting instead of just quitting, because if everyone that is good and moral just quits, then the whole company is just going to go even more to creepy sex stuff. And it's not like parents are going to stop showing it to their kids necessarily. So I think the only way to affect change within an institution like Disney is to empower those employees that are feeling alienated and, letting them protest and making sure they have a voice and hoping and, I don't know, somehow backing them so that they can actually affect change
Right.
within the company, like
Well,
getting
especially-
executives fired or something.
No,
I
it's
don't
like
know.
all you have to do is be a talented employee and threaten to quit over this. And if you have enough
Right.
employees that do that, it's very costly, even for mega corporations, for companies to lose people that have talent. It's costly for them to find the talent in the first place. It's costly for them to retain the talent. But if a large, even a few percentage points of the talent in your company leaves, that could be devastating. It could
Right.
take it could take a long time to recover from that. This happens in the software world all the time. If a company starts going south and all of the talented employees leave, that'll just accelerate the downfall of the company because they can never recuperate those losses. So it's like you could have all the money in the bank, but if you're bleeding talented people and they don't want to work for you, that's going to be just as much of a death knell as going bankrupt. You're not going to be as profitable. You're not going to produce as much good entertainment.
Yeah, I guess the next step from these protests would be all of those people who are against this agenda to strike, or I guess you can't strike if you're not a union, but walk out, like do a company walkout or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the left-wingers do that all the time. Twitter has a walkout like every other week.
Well, Netflix did it too, over trans
So it's
stuff.
like, what would happen if not just the conservative-minded people, but just the sane people? What happens if they would do that?
The people not in the cult, like we talked about.
But the problem is, again, it goes back to the cult. Those people, if they protest against that, they're automatically smeared as bigoted.
That's fine, because you don't want to be in the cult anyway.
Right, that's true. But I'm just saying,
take the smear of the bigot and affect
people
change.
Won't do that. It's much easier to walk out when the entire establishment of the country is going to support you, right? No one is going to speak out against the Netflix employees, so they can walk out whenever they want. But if you're a religious person at Netflix and you walk out, you'll just be a bigoted evangelist fundamentalist, and they'll smear your name, and they'll blacklist you. They won't hire you again.
But I wonder if, because this issue involves children, if it will include more people that aren't just right-wing or whatever.
Well, it will, but I'm saying that won't be effective.
Well, but I don't know that people care so much anymore about being called a bigot, because you can get called a bigot for the smallest thing. So at this point, it's kind of like, you might as well do what you think is right, because they're going to call you names no matter what you do.
Because I think the difference is, when you work at Disney, number one is that's not only the top media company, but if you get fired from Disney for your stance, no one's going to want to touch you.
Except for Daily Wire.
Well, but Daily Wire's not going to be able to absorb everyone that would get fired. So, like, you wouldn't get a job in Hollywood. You wouldn't get a job at any other animation studio. Like the Netflix example, if you're a software engineer that speaks... Well, James Damore, we don't even need to have a hypothetical. James Damore, when he published that Google memo basically saying that there's fewer women in tech than men because they have a difference of interest fundamentally. He got fired for that, and he can't get hired anywhere else. He can't get hired at any of they're called FANG. It's Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and Google. Yeah. Those are the big ones. He can't get hired at any of those companies because he got fired from one company.
That's crazy.
So it's like like a cultural blacklisting that people who are, I don't want to say contrarians, but the people that oppose this gender ideology stuff, they're going to be blacklisted from the top jobs. I wonder, though,
if everyone who was not in the cult that did work at these FANG companies and Disney all did it together. Like, all of the companies, all of the people walked out at the same time, like a big multi-company walkout, if that would change it. Because if it's just one company, all those people might lose their jobs and then it's over for them. But if every company had a faction of employees that did it at the same time, I mean, that's never going to happen, but it would be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if that would happen, but it might have an effect. I don't know.
Anyway.
Do you want to talk about this next one?
I mean, I didn't really want to talk about these next two so much as just highlight the headlines and the subheadlines. So this one is from the Post-Millennial again, because they're the only ones talking about predatory teachers. So this one says 4 more U.S. school teachers charged with sexual abuse of minors. One instance.
Let's see, I'll go back. One instance
happened in Florida, but the stories range from coast to coast. And then this other one that I have here is fury over the Ron DeSantis parental rights and education bill distracts from a spree of teachers targeting students. And this one, Florida teacher arrested for sexual misconduct with students. Stribling, the convict, faces charges of lewd, lascivious molestation of a minor, lewd, lascivious conduct, offense against students by an authority figure, and transmitting material harmful to a minor. And then I had another one pop up today.
Yeah, I've got it here.
No, not this one.
Okay.
It was another teacher that popped up at 1 p.m. today. California teacher charged with 29 counts of lewd acts with children, including students. And then another one right after that, high school choir teacher charged with 9 counts of criminal sexual assault of student. 4 headlines in a week about teachers.
Well, I saw a stat
predatory.
too. I don't have it pulled up, but it was something like children are more likely to be abused in the public school system by 2.5 times the next highest one.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's like people talk about the Catholic Church, or they talk about like abuse from stepmothers, stepfathers, whatever. Whatever other cause is highest, public schools are 2.5 times that risk.
That's insane.
That's what the stat said. So, I mean, obviously that's just a stat. Statistics are kind of a little bit malleable, but I would believe it for sure.
I mean, we're seeing all the roaches scatter. But yeah, and then just as we were sitting down to record, this one popped up,
Yep.
which I just thought was funny. From the Post-Millennial, trans inmate in prison for killing cellmate now identifies as infant, demands diapers and baby food.
Wow.
A source said the inmate is, quote, pretty demanding on the resources of the prison and enjoys being the center of attention.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously this is the problem with this whole ideology, is that it doesn't have any sort of internal consistency whatsoever.
Right.
And so like if you can claim to be one thing that you're not, then there's no reason to stop. There's any line that you can draw at no, you can't identify at that would be completely arbitrary in that worldview, right?
Right.
So if you say I'm a man and I can identify as a woman, congratulations. There's no set of logic that you can use that would draw a line as what you could identify as. Nothing. Yeah. Because you're just throwing reality out the window at that point.
There's a British celebrity who is trans Korean.
Oh boy. Oh yeah, that guy.
He had his eyes plastic surgery to
How
look
was
Korean.
that guy not smeared as a racist because
They
he
tried.
made his eyes?
They tried, and he was like, "You can't call me a racist because I am Korean." And everyone's like, "Okay, you're insane, dude."
Yeah. That's crazy.
But yeah, I think a source, whatever source is quoted here, nailed it on the head. They enjoy being the center of attention.
Yeah.
It's a narcissistic game.
It's it's just it's an easy way to get yourself attention. You know, like it's just I think we've talked about this before, but you're a person that hasn't accomplished anything in your life. There's nothing special about your achievements. You don't have a good intellect, or you do have a good intellect and you're not putting it to good use. You know,
true.
You don't do anything interesting. You don't have any hobbies. You watch Netflix all day, every day, and that's it. And you don't do your schoolwork. That kind of person rightly feels terrible and useless. But if you can just claim that you have some weird sexual identity, that automatically gets you attention, the attention that you would otherwise get if you were doing meaningful things in the world. Right? And not to say that attention is the end all be all, because if you're doing meaningful things in the world, I do think that need to be validated falls away.
Right.
Like if you do your own thing and you're fully satisfied, you're doing difficult things and accomplishing that and making progress, you're not going to care what other people think about you. You know, like let's take an extreme example, Elon Musk. He is so accomplished that there's nothing anyone can say to him that's going to throw him off his game. Nothing.
Right. I know.
Because he's got everything. He doesn't have any, false idea of what he is.
Right.
He knows what he's done. And this is the case for any accomplished person. You know what you've done. No one can take that away from you. Therefore, your identity is sealed.
Right.
There's no attack that can be levied against you that would put you into a PTSD attack or whatever.
Right. Well, and I was just kind of sitting here thinking about why, what would motivate people to do that other than it's easy and the attention thing, and instead of getting attention from accomplishments, getting attention because of the identity that you claim, and how it relates to the actual cult that leftism is. And it's almost like a pyramid scheme cult, kind of, where there's a hierarchy within a cult. There's always a hierarchy within a cult. There's the cult leader, and then there's the first circle and the closest circle. And then everyone is underlings from there, and it trickles down. So the higher up the victim totem pole you can get, the closer you can get to the cult leader. So the more things you can claim, the more bragging rights you have within the cult, I guess. Which would make sense.
Yeah.
Because if you are trying to, I'm a black woman. Well, I'm a black gay woman. Well, I'm a black gay trans woman. It's like, all this arguing, trying to figure out who's going to be the most victimized of everyone. The more victimized you are, the more benefits you get. within the cult.
What you also described is that idea of intersectionality, right? Like if you can segment yourself into further and further marginalized groups, you just get more and more accolades, which is exactly what you're saying. But that's what intersectionality is. It's like, you're a black woman. Oh, well, I'm a gay black woman. I'm a transsexual gay black woman. I'm a gay black woman that was born poor or whatever.
Yeah,
like you add all these. But the problem with that ideology is that these people don't seem to understand is that if you segment yourself into enough groups, you end up just being the lone person in that set of groups, which is individualism.
Right.
So what these people have done is if they just take the idea to a logical end, they discover individuality, individualism, individual sovereignty, that every person has a different set of characteristics or experiences that makes them unique. So it's not necessarily that intersectionality is wrong. It's just that the lines that they draw are totally arbitrary and they don't take it to its logical conclusion.
And the problem with intersectionality now is that it started off during the civil rights movement just for black women. Because in the 60s, it was difficult to be a woman and it was difficult to be black. And it was really difficult to be a black woman. In the 60s, though, like decades and decades ago. So intersectionality came from that because it was the intersection of being black and being a woman. And that was one specific faction of the civil rights movement that they were trying to propel into better treatment of black women. And now it's become this bastardization that if you claim X amount of victimhoods, you're intersectional or whatever.
I'd like 3 victimhoods, please.
So intersectionality was probably one of those ideas and one of those movements that should have just been done after the civil rights laws were passed and amended. But it never went away. Or it did go away, and then with the advent of critical race theory, it kind of made a comeback because Harvard students are retarded academically.
That's true.
So it made a comeback, and it probably shouldn't have. And now we're dealing with anyone and their mother who is a victim claiming intersectionality.
Yeah, so going off the identity thing, I want to share a story that I encountered. Not a story that I encountered, a story that happened to me. So I'm a software engineer, and I get all kinds of recruiters reaching out, trying to poach me for their various startups or whatever. No big deal. But the one that reached out to me, I'm not going to name the company, and I wish I had taken screenshots of this because it was really fascinating. They not only reached out to me, a white male, saying that they need software engineers, but they linked to a blog post they wrote about their diversity and inclusion initiatives. So I went there to their website, it was a Medium post, and they had actually charted out with colored graphs of color, like how their proportion of non-white people has changed over the few years that they've been in business. Like they literally graphed it out, and they showed the shrinking white population and declared that a great success for their company.
Geez.
That they were happy that they were shrinking the white population and growing all of the people of color, the population in their company. And the kicker was their company was 41% white people, which is far below the population ratio, right? It's like 60+% of the United States is white, 41% is this company, and they're still trying to drive it lower. And I was like disgusted. I was like, what are you doing? Like, first of all, you reached out to me. I'm a white man. Can't you see that I'm not going to fit your statistics?
Yeah, really.
But 2, like, you're celebrating the fact that you are just openly discriminating against white people and driving them out of your, that might be a little bit unfair. They're growing the company, and as they're growing the company, they're adding fewer and fewer white people.
Right. They're choosing more people of color.
Correct. And I was like, should I respond to this and say, like, I'm not going to work for a company that hates me for my immutable characteristics or finds me less desirable than the other employees? You
should have.
Did
you delete that correspondence?
I did, but it's still in the Gmail trash bin, so I might dig it back up and respond. Because it's just like, how... I understand doing that covertly because you have an agenda. Yeah. But to advertise that to me, as a white person, that you're happy that you're reducing the population.
But even advertising that to a black person, like a black programmer. Right. I'm not a black programmer, but hypothetically, if I was, I'd probably look at that and go, that because programmers, right, are supposed to be of a superior intelligence.
Autistic.
Because you have to be.
Yeah, autistic.
Right. You have to be, because it doesn't make sense to just someone of average intelligence. It's too complex. It's too complicated. It's literally different languages. It's too hard to learn, and it's tedious, and most people don't want to do it. So you have to be autistic to do it. And if I was a black programmer, I'd probably go, this is really racist, because you're intentionally picking black people instead of picking people that are best suited for the job. So their company probably isn't even doing that well, quality-wise. Like, maybe they're bringing in money because they can tout their race card or whatever, saying like, look at all these BIPOCs that we have that work for us, and people are like, here's my money, but it's a shit product. So how is that helping anybody? Because eventually, when all of this race crap blows over, your company is going to be left in the dust, bankrupt, because you never sought to produce a good product that people would want and would get use out of. Instead, you were so focused on employing only black and brown people.
Right. Yeah, and there's side effects too. It's like, so putting on my black person hat, if I was a black programmer and I saw that, yeah, putting on, oh no. So, imposter syndrome is something that you've heard of, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's basically the idea, for people that don't know, that, you get into a role and for whatever reason you feel like an imposter. Like, you're hired to do the job and you're doing the job well by objective metrics, but you still feel like a fraud, or that you're faking, or whatever. From what I understand, this feeling is very substantial in the software engineer world, because I think it's because there's 1,000,001 ways to do everything, and so you're always questioning like whether you're doing things the best way, or if there's something that you don't know. And so if I'm a black programmer applying to this company and they hire me, I'm gonna have that nagging, extra compounding negative thought on top of the imposter syndrome, like, oh God, I shouldn't be in this role because they only hired me for my skin color.
Right.
Like, that is going to be more psychologically damaging than knowing that you were the most than knowing that they wanted you for your talents, right? Because that's the best remedy to imposter syndrome, having a company showing you that you are wanted because of your skill, right? That's going to reduce imposter syndrome. But if you're hiring based on race, well, that's going to exacerbate it, right? And me, on the flip side, being a white man, I'm questioning, like, would it even be worth my effort to do their coding assessment, to do the interviews? And then if I get rejected, I'm going to be like, well, I just wasted my time because they weren't going to hire me anyway.
Right, because you're white. Right.
So it's like, what? And then going into that environment, if I am hired, I'm going to be constantly questioning if I'm valued as an employee, because they're constantly touting the fact that they don't want more people like me.
Right.
And it's not that I want more people like me. It's just that they are making the environment hostile to me.
Right.
Right. If I was in a normal work environment with no D&I initiative and they hired a bunch of black people, I wouldn't think anything of it. I wouldn't be like, oh, they're doing a secret D&I. No, it'd be like, oh, they were hired because they were the best candidates.
Yeah, they just happen to be black.
But the fact that they outwardly express their desire to hire fewer white people is very, we'll just call it evil.
Well, and the other thing, if we're talking about our hypothetical black programmer friend, the other thing that would be concerning is, you're a black programmer, you got hired for this job at this company, but do you want to be putting your name on something that is not a good product? Because it might not be, if they're only hiring people because of their skin color. If they're not hiring the best person for the job. Let's say you are the best person for the job, but the rest of your team isn't. They just all happen to be black or brown. So then I would be worried about putting my name on something that was not good quality. And then if that company tanks and I have to go find another job, what does that do to your own personal reputation?
Right.
So that's something to worry about too. If you're not hiring based on merit and skill, that's not going to only hurt the company. It's going to hurt the individuals who might go on to do something else later. Who don't stay with the company.
Yeah.
Because if it is a really bad company and makes a terrible name for itself, anyone who worked there is going to be like, well, I can't put that on my resume, so I'll just look like I was jobless for 5 years or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
So it can be harmful in a lot of ways, not just on its face at the start.
Yeah. And this is, the tragic thing is, like, just about the left wing generally, is that they're throwing away everything that's been accepted. Like, meritocracy is good, race blindness is good. They're throwing that all away And then they're re-encountering all of the problems that existed prior to us adopting this enlightened state of mind, right? Individual freedom is paramount. Well, now they're going back to group collectivism. They're going to find out that that doesn't work. And you're going to ultimately figure out, oh, individual sovereignty is the best strategy, right? It's like they're constantly throwing away cultural norms that we've accepted for a while, trying to start from scratch and then running into all the same problems. It's like, how about you just trust that we've figured this out over a couple thousand years?
Isn't that how every communist society has failed?
Basically, yeah.
Because they have decided arbitrarily that individualism doesn't work and meritocracy doesn't work. So we must become the collective. And then in 20, 30 years, they find out that it's not working.
Right. Well, the Cultural Revolution in China is a great example. They threw out everything that made China great, both culturally and, well, I guess they weren't that great economically, but China was a great cultural power before the modern era.
Yeah.
They had a rich history of religion and art and science. And the Cultural Revolution literally decided to just like destroy Chinese history and culture. Yeah. And they got rid of religion. It was Buddhism and some other ones. And while they ended up with famines that killed millions upon millions of people, and it just doesn't, like, this tendency to just throw out what you have that's good because you think you can remake it better is just, I think that's just a tendency that has to be resisted at all costs. Like,
that's just human arrogance.
Right. And that doesn't mean that current systems can't be improved upon.
Right.
But it certainly means that you cannot take a complex system, destroy it, and replace it with something better. That will never happen. That will never happen. Small incremental tweaks. And if the small incremental tweak causes problems, revert it. Right. And
try
that's
something
how you
else.
Right. And that's how you make progress. You build on top of what works currently.
Right.
But I think the problem is it works so well that we're blind to how well it works. You know, meritocracy has served us so well that we're like, we don't need that.
Well, like Camille Paglia likes to say, we're in the age of decadence. Anytime there's a society in the age of decadence, it is doomed to fail. It is doomed to fall. And then something, I think she says new and barbaric, like she calls it barbaric, but it just means something not so decadent, more baseline society will come up in its place, or a barbaric society will overtake it. So like in our case, we need to watch out for China because they might be considered a more barbaric society because they aren't as progressed as we are. They haven't gotten to the age of decadence yet, probably because of their communism. Yeah. But a country like ours needs to be careful of a country like that taking over because they can see our weak points because we have become too comfortable to the point that we are lazy, we're gluttonous, and we aren't thinking that anything can harm us anymore.
Right. Well, the barbarism could also come from inside too. Like, like the rise of Hitler in Germany was largely the response to Germany being economically destroyed after World War I. But World War I, you could argue, was a result of the age of decadence that they were living in at that time, which was they had all these machines, industrial revolution that was making everyone very wealthy. They developed all these new weapons of war. They were so removed from, well, they had never experienced modern war, so they were removed from this like idea of like massive all-out war. And so they were flippant about it. They just like went headfirst into it, and it was disastrous. It destroyed Germany. And then the barbarism comes from inside, where Hitler says, okay, well, this was a tragedy. I'm strong enough to bring Germany back up to its greatness. And there's a danger in that too, because then that person can have bad motives. And then, so like in the United States, if this left wing goes too far and totally destroys the country, you are running the risk that someone probably on the right wing is going to overtake and maybe not make things better.
Right. Well, and the other thing too that I just thought of is all of the illegal immigrants that are flooding into our country. We are experiencing an age of decadence, but a lot of these immigrants are coming from poverty, are coming from actual communism, Venezuela, Guatemala, and there's a lot of Cuban Americans too who remember what communism was like in Cuba. Yep. So I think even that, and they're culturally more conservative too, South American people and Mexican people. Yeah. So I think that could be something we need to watch for too, if Americans keep growing into decadency and laziness and everything. We should watch for those cultures to overrun us. Yeah. Become like northern Mexico, basically.
Well,
I don't know if that would be the worst thing though.
Northern Mexico?
Yeah. Mexicans have pretty conservative values.
No, I mean, I love Hispanics. I just wish that
well, the other sorry.
we had more legal Hispanic,
Yeah.
because they're all conservative. They're all Catholics. They're all stand-up people, hardworking. They have a culture of like hard work is necessary, family is necessary, and the Republicans are making great gains, particularly in the South with Hispanics in Florida. Like Florida Hispanics are like Republican now.
Oh yeah, they
So
flipped hard. Yeah.
So,
But the
more
other
of
thing
those
too
kind of
is
people.
that the Mexican cartels that are coming in from the border are owned by China.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a problem too that we need to watch for.
Yeah.
That most people aren't aware of and don't know. So they're like, yeah, just open the border, but it's like, okay, but you're technically opening our border up to China.
Opening the border up to China, to COVID, which these people claimed was so serious, and yet the borders were wide open.
Well, they reversed that.
Yeah.
Title 42.
Well, not yet. It's going to expire
well.
in May, I think.
Yeah. They're just kind of trying to let that go quietly, though.
Yeah.
They're like,
Anything else to talk about on identity? Or should we talk about infanticide?
So. Yeah, we can talk about infanticide.
Okay, well, so what is this story?
So this is really depressing. This is from the Daily Wire. It was first...
Hey, Jeremy Boring.
Hi, Jeremy Boring. It was first released by Mary Margaret Olahan, I guess a week ago now.
April 4th.
Yeah, she... I think the very first story, though, was before April 4th. And she's been updating this story, and it's been really heartbreaking. And
so what's the headline?
Really, really sad. And it says, DC authorities won't autopsy recovered bodies of these aborted babies. Police are hiding barbaric crimes, pro-lifers say.
Is there anything in the article we should read, or do you want to just riff on
I mean,
this?
we can kind of read everything. I mean, it's all important. But basically what happened was one of the leaders of PAUU or something like that, it's a pro-life organization, had obtained a medical waste box that was sealed, and it had early and midterm babies, but in pieces in some bags, and then it had I think 2 or 3 either born or killed and then induced babies. So they were completely intact. They were completely to term. I think they might have been a few weeks early, but they would have been able to live outside of the womb at the stage of development that they were at. And Mary Margaret Olahan has reported that one of the babies, I think the baby boy that they named, I want to say Christopher X, had cuts on the back of his neck, which implies that his brain was cut, or his skull was cut open, and his brains were taken out of his head, either during the birthing process, before he was fully out of the canal, or after he was fully in this world. So they're calling it late-term abortion, but it is truly murder.
Well, it's called, either late-term abortion, or I think that's...
post-birth abortion is what they're calling it.
Partial birth abortion.
No, partial birth abortion is when it's coming out.
Right.
And they do that.
Yeah. So there's 3 categories.
But they also, places like DC and Maryland are also, it is legal to do post-birth abortion, which is just murder.
Right.
Where they take the brain out of the baby. And so this organization obtained the medical waste that was supposed to go to a medical waste facility that burns the waste and turns it into electricity. So they were going to burn these babies' bodies to make into electricity in the DC and Baltimore area, which is awful.
That's what they do with medical waste. Do they burn it?
The one company that they were sending it to, that's what they do.
Oh,
I don't remember the name of the company, but
it's not important.
It's not important, and they deny accepting fetal remains as medical waste, but it's kind of one of those like, we won't tell kind of things.
Right.
And this is a DC abortion clinic that has been around for a long, long time. And there was leaked footage also, or leaked audio rather, from one of the PAUU organization's members went to this abortion clinic to ask questions about, if she wanted to get an abortion. And he was basically like, well, you know, like when someone has cancer and they're terminal, hospitals will do everything they can to save that person, but we don't do that here with the babies.
Yeah.
Which is really
He's basically just
upsetting.
saying, yes, we'll make sure the baby's dead no matter what.
Yeah. So if you have to birth it and then would kill it, or would kill it while it's being birthed or whatever.
But you could tell that he was in that video. We don't have it pulled up unless it's here, but
it might be in here.
In that video, he was trying so hard to dance around the fact that he was admitting that they would make sure the baby died no matter what.
Yeah, he said everything except I will make sure I kill your baby.
Right. He was being so like, and that's just the clearest indicator that you know these people know what they're doing is wrong. Because they cannot just come out and directly say, yes, we are going to make sure that the infant or the baby or the fetus doesn't survive.
Yeah.
They never just come out and say that. They beat around the bush and they say, well, you know, let's say, like, they give all these examples and like, let's say, you know, well, like other places might like try to revive the baby, but we'll just be like, you know.
If you go up a little bit, so they had asked, down a little bit, they had asked an obstetrician about the process and about the bruising and the injuries on the babies. And Kolb is the obstetrician, is quoted as saying, "It is important to note that all of these babies appear to be of a viable gestational age," which means that they had been delivered alive at their current developmental stage. Had they been delivered at their current developmental stage, they would have had a very good chance of survival outside of the womb with appropriate support. It is also... Oh, go ahead.
So the sentence above that says that baby X, I think this is Christopher X.
No, there was a Christopher and a baby X.
Okay, well, anyway, he says that this baby is between 28 weeks and gestational age. So 28 weeks, that's premature babies live when being born at 28 weeks all the time.
Well, and I think last year it was a 21-week-old baby survived. That's like really premature. Yeah. And he lived. So they were twins. Mm-hmm. The baby girl died, but the baby boy lived, and he's still alive today.
I have a broader point to make about this, but maybe we'll finish going through the background first.
And then it says Kolb also said, "It is also important to note that these babies are pain capable at this point in development, and especially those whose lives were ended by a dilation and evacuation. Abortion would be expected to experience excruciating pain during this barbaric procedure." The neonatologist added that it is, quote, "beyond horrific and devastating for me as a neonatologist to see these images, as these babies are representative of the very same patient population that I care for." To then see these discarded, aborted babies and even try to imagine what they went through during these horrific abortion procedures is infuriating and devastating beyond words, she said.
Yeah, so I kind of, I mean, it's obviously very sad, but I don't like the framing of, the framing that the conservatives are sort of getting into is like, oh, because these babies can experience pain, you know, that's what makes it wrong. It's like, I understand what you're trying to convey, and it's obviously exceedingly terrible, horrific, a great evil that this is happening, but it's not just the pain that makes it evil, right?
Right.
It's not like, I don't care if you abort a baby at 1 week or at 28 weeks. You're still depriving a human being of the right to life, right? And you know, with the viability question of 28 weeks, I think the problem that I have with the pro-infanticide movement argument, which is what I'm going to call it from now on, because it's not a choice. You can't, choosing to murder somebody is not a legitimate choice. Right. The pro-infanticide movement, they try to come up with all these arbitrary definitions of like what viable is, and it's unsatisfactory just in a logical sense, because as medical science progresses, eventually you're going to get to the point where an egg that is fertilized is viable outside the womb. Right. So the logical conclusion of saying that, well, a baby is viable at X point or Y point, the logical conclusion is eventually abortion should be illegal. So they're recognizing that this is a life worth protecting at some point. That where the point they draw is completely and totally arbitrary. It doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. right? And
well,
it's like
they were saying that, except this DC abortion clinic doesn't make that claim.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is particularly evil because they're not even trying to fancy it up with some arbitrary definitions. They're just saying we're going to make sure the abortion happens, right? But it's like you just step through it logically, right? Like, oh, it's just a clump of cells. Okay, well, day 1, is it just a clump of cells? Fine, sure. 2, is it just a clump of cells? Like, does, at day 8, does it not become a clump of cells? Like, are you not a clump of cells?
I mean, technically I am, right? I mean...
Right. It's like, when does it stop becoming a clump of cells? And the broader problem is, like, how do you define a human life that doesn't start with a fertilized egg?
Yeah.
How do you define it? You cannot say what a human life is without understanding the nature of consciousness, which we don't have. So it's like...
and I really hate the clump of cells thing, too, because a zygote is unique.
Yeah.
The DNA combination of a zygote is unique to that one organism. No other organism is like it unless it's a completely identical twin.
Right.
Nothing. So a zygote is not just a clump of cells, because a clump of cells is just like your dead skin sloughing off or whatever.
Right.
A clump of cells has all of the DNA it will ever need to become a human being. So it's not a good argument anyway, but it's a way to dehumanize it so that it's justifiable.
Right.
So I don't know how you dehumanize a baby that looks like a baby.
Right.
I mean, these are not, even at 21 weeks, it might still be a little translucent and hunchy, but it has feet, it has hands, it has eyes, it has a nose, it has ears. Its lungs might not be developed, but its heart beats, its brain works. At 21 weeks, it looks like a baby. It's just tiny.
Well, and I have a problem just logically speaking with defining an entire life based on the quote unquote larval stage of it. Right. Like, we never do that with anything else. No. We don't say, oh, because it was this thing in the past, it's irrelevant now.
Yeah.
And we even take that, the attitude all the time that, oh, this thing's going to be great in the future, right? When you plant seeds in spring, you're not just like, oh, it's just a seed. No, you're like, oh, that's going to be food. Right? You're like, you are fully expecting it to realize its full potential. But we don't do that with human babies. It's like, oh, because it's a clump of cells in this 9-month period, then we have the right to deprive somebody of 80 plus years of life. It's like, why are you defining that life in that, do you know what I'm saying? Like, in that stage.
Well, and it's interesting too, because the same leftist cultists who are interested in commodifying the human body for the purposes of in vitro fertilization for gay couples are the same people that are okay with murdering a baby as post-birth abortion or whatever they want to call it. What? If you're going to go through all that trouble for in vitro, why wouldn't you just find a woman who doesn't want her baby and adopt it?
Right.
Why are babies' bodies being sent to medical waste facilities to be incinerated? That baby could have been alive today and in the arms of a gay couple. Why is this such a hard thing to understand? Well, oh, if the mom doesn't want it, then she should have the right to kill it. Or, maybe just give it up for adoption.
Right. Or
if you truly don't want it.
Yeah. Or here's a radical idea. Shift your priorities and keep your child.
Yeah, that too.
Why is that not the number one response we give to women who are upset about their pregnancies? Shift your focus, care for your child. This is
time to grow up.
We should be telling women, even if you're at accidental pregnancy, we should be telling women, this is probably the greatest thing you will ever do in your life. Yeah. So embrace it.
So some good news. So I work at a dental office for one of my jobs, and we had a patient come in. She is 6 weeks into being a mom.
Wow.
6 weeks. And the last time I saw her, she was kind of like, hum and haw and dull. She is glowing. She is like, I'm so new at this, but I cannot imagine my life without my son. She's like, he wasn't planned, but he's my everything now. She's like, now I'm trying to figure out how to pay everything off faster so I can quit my job sooner and just be a stay-at-home mom. And I'm like, that is so amazing, because you hear stories like this and it seems like this is the only thing we ever hear. You never get to hear from just regular people who are still having kids and loving the process. She's like, it wasn't planned. My boyfriend and I were kind of freaked out, but now we have this kid and I just want to be with him all the time.
Yeah.
Because she's still on maternity leave.
Well, Cernovich had a great tweet a couple of days ago where he said, I wonder how many women sit down at night after a few glasses of wine in and think, I could have my son sitting right here next to me now if I hadn't had an abortion. Right? Like, think about your future self. Are you doing your future self any favors? Like, think of yourself, you have an unwanted pregnancy as a mother or a father. Think about the position that you'll be in 10 years in the future. Are you going to regret it? The answer is going to be yes.
Yes.
It's going to be yes.
I know 2 women personally who have had abortions. And the one I know for sure regrets it because we were talking about it and she didn't want to have an abortion. She was in a really abusive relationship and he basically made her, which was the wrong choice and she knows that. But every time I talk to her, she's like, my baby would have been 6 now. My baby would have been 5 now. And she's big into tattoos and she ended up getting a tattoo of what she would have named her baby girl and what her birthday would have been. And it's just upsetting because she's like, I can barely live with myself that I did that. And the other one I know actually had 2 abortions and she is completely out of her mind now. She's an alcoholic.
Yeah.
She has not been able to get her life back on track since. And I'm like, okay, you made a mistake. You know you made a mistake. 2?
Yeah.
How do you do 2?
Well, I wonder if it's like, people get into these like death spirals where they do something bad or they get into a depressive state and then they just self-sabotage every time. Like, it's hard to, that's what I've heard is that it's hard to dig yourself out when you're in a depressive state, that you almost want to do self-sabotaging things to justify the fact that you're miserable.
Right.
And so it's like, and that's not justifying it, but it's just might be an explanation for why
it's a coping mechanism. Yeah.
She's like, well, my life's already screwed up anyway. I'm already an alcoholic. So what does it matter if I have another abortion? You know?
But I don't think she was an alcoholic until after the second one, though.
Well,
and it's like, how would you not take that as a sign that you need to change your life and be a mom?
Yeah.
It's just depressing and it's evil. It's satanic.
And this could be fixed if we as a society just emphasize the fact having children is the greatest thing that most people will ever do. That's maybe the greatest thing that anyone could ever do.
Yeah.
Like, just emphasize that fact. Your career is not more important. Your expedience, your convenience is not more important than having a son or a daughter.
Right.
It's not. I'm sorry. Like, even if you're poor, even if you're struggling to make ends meet, even if you're in a shitty situation, it's still
better.
Right.
It's still better.
Would you rather be in a shitty situation with your son or your daughter? Or would you rather be in a shitty situation alone? It's like, think about it. People just think. Think
even
more
when
than the near term.
Even when I was younger, I'm like, if I get pregnant, I'm just going to find a way to make it work. Because it's never been an option in my mind, one, to kill a baby, but even to give it up for adoption.
Right.
I was like, I'm in college. If I get pregnant, I'll transfer schools. I'll move back home.
Right.
I'll put it on pause because I've always wanted to be a mom. And so I'm like, that's just not even a question.
Right.
Like, I'd much rather be a mom than be in school,
Yeah.
And the other thing about that is, I think a reason why we don't really push for adoption so much is that once a woman actually births her child, in those first moments, something kicks in her brain and she goes, I don't want to give up my baby.
Right.
And that throws off their whole plan to keep adults like children.
Yeah.
And weak and helpless. They want to completely change family structure on purpose. These leftist cultists. And if a mother holds her baby in those first moments, she's never going to let that baby go ever again. So they're like, well, if you just kill it, then you never have that experience.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of this abortion issue could be solved too by parents taking a proactive role and saying to their children, look, if you get pregnant accidentally, we'll be here to support. Like, you don't have to feel alone. Like, you
don't have to be afraid of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, even if, like, let's say a teenage pregnancy in high school, if you're a parent in that situation, I think it would help to just say, look, you did mess up, but, or even before this happens, like, make sure it's known that if it happens, you messed up. Oh, well, we'll be here. We'll make sure that we'll take care of the baby while you finish your schooling.
Right.
You'll have grandma and grandpa here.
Yeah.
We'll take care of the baby. No problems. Like, I wonder how much of that isn't being said and how much of this problem could be alleviated if women knew that they had a support structure where they could still pursue their career and have their child. Like, they could have the best of both worlds, right?
Well, not every family is like that.
That's true, but I wonder how many families could be like that and aren't making it known or aren't setting the, it's like emergency plans.
Yeah.
Like, you've got an emergency plan for life too, up to and including an unexpected pregnancy.
Right. Yeah, I don't even like to say like unwanted pregnancy.
Unexpected.
Unexpected, but I don't know if our mom ever had that conversation with you, but she had that.
I can't get pregnant yet.
No. But she had that conversation with me a lot, like, and not even like the you made a mistake part, because she never wanted it to come across like the baby is a mistake. The baby is a blessing, no matter what, because it's really difficult to get pregnant. Like, it's almost impossible that any of us are here. It's crazy. So she was always really good about like, if you have unprotected sex, you could get pregnant. A baby's not a mistake, but you need to be able to accept that responsibility. And I'll be here to help you. We'll figure it out together. But she never made it seem like the pregnancy is a mistake. Yeah. Because I think that's an important distinction too.
The act that leads to it is a mistake.
Right, but that's why you have to say that ahead of time. Like, this could happen.
Right.
You need to be able to accept the consequences of your actions. Yeah. But I think making sure that you don't frame the pregnancy as a mistake is important too, because you don't want the pregnant daughter to feel like a burden on the family, or that the baby is a burden on the family all of a sudden, because babies are supposed to bring joy to families and are supposed to be new life, right? They're supposed to be hope for the future and what can be molded with this clay. Yeah. So that's an important distinction,
you want to set the expectations ahead of time that a baby will be welcome if it happens unexpectedly.
It's going to be a big adjustment. You want to make that clear. Like, it will throw your whole world upside down. So you probably don't want to have an unplanned pregnancy, but any pregnancy should be considered a blessing and a welcome thing. Right. And it shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to hide it and then get an abortion and then regret it forever because you were 15 or 16 or 17 or whatever. Right.
And even with like the social ostracization.
There you go.
Like, obviously you don't want to really be a pregnant girl in high school because that's very awkward. But, the parents could step in and say, we'll homeschool you for that. We'll just do schooling at home while you, so
for
you can be comfortable.
9 months or whatever. Yeah.
Right. So you can be comfortable. You don't have people oogling you or whatever, or rumors spreading around or whatever.
Or even if you never want to go back to high school, you just want to finish online. Make sure that the baby's father is in the picture as much as possible, if that's a scenario. But I think pushing that kind of family role instead of peer pressure, oh shit, you have to have an abortion, is way better.
Well, I think a lot of parents do that too. I think there's a lot of parents out there that pressure their daughters into like getting abortions, and which
is so weird. I don't understand that.
I mean, if you're an uppity family and you're like only concerned about material possessions and status, and like this is unexpected and it tarnishes your goody two shoes family image,
I just can't imagine how that is worse than this,
because it's satanic. Satan's working. You want to get rid of Satan, you got to get rid of the skeeters. Gus Johnson. Anyway.
It does make me happy though when people follow through with their pregnancies and realize that it is the greatest thing they'll ever do. And it's nice to see. It was nice to see someone who was so new into motherhood
just loving it.
Gushing with joy, and she's like, I really don't want to go back to work, and I'm like, don't. Stay home forever with your baby.
Find a way to make it work.
Yeah. So, and she's your age too, so I was like, that's so good. Have more. And she's
Before you're too old.
She's like, I'm the youngest of 4, and I have offered the first grandchild. I'm like, oh, your siblings need to get on that. So her mom has been really helpful too, because she's like, first grandbaby.
You are going to be such a good grandmother. You're going to be you're going to be like, where's them babies?
I don't even have kids yet.
I know, but
we're
like
already jumping.
Thinking, many years into the future, you're going to be like, you guys got to have babies.
Yes. I like the idea that conservatives need to just have football teams of babies. Yeah. Because if all of the leftists don't want to have any kids, we should just have all of them, and then they'll be outnumbered in a generation.
That's a good way. National divorce through population demographic
They're
shifts.
like, everyone needs to have 8, 10, 12 children, 15 children, however many you can get. That's how many you should have. People in the freaking 40s and 50s and 60s did it. We can do it.
Yeah.
Bring it back.
Yeah. All right.
Old people are always like, I am one of 11 siblings. And you're like, Jesus, God.
So,
bring it back.
Moving on to a slightly less depressing topic.
Okay.
I saw this tweet, and I don't know who this guy is. Oh, goodness. I don't know who this guy is, but it is an interesting tweet. So this is from Simon Kustenmacher.
Sure.
And he says in the tweet, how much do U.S. Republican and U.S. Democratic voters trust various media organizations? The Republican skepticism regarding the Weather Channel is hard to stomach for a data guy like me. So he's showing this, I don't know what you call this kind of graph.
I don't know, a slider graph, I guess?
Yeah, it's like a slider graph that basically on the y-axis lists all the different news channels, and then on the x-axis it plots what the Republican and Democratic trust in is that. And so there's a couple of interesting things about this graph, actually. So he's right. Republicans, only 50% of Republican voters trust the Weather Channel.
Well, okay, but to be fair, most Republicans probably live in really treacherous climates that are impossible to predict. Like where we live, 70 one day, 40 the next. You think I'm going to trust the goddamn Weather Channel to predict accurately how the weather's going to be?
Yeah.
Probably not. So.
Yeah. Well, and somebody in the comments linked an actual clip where the Weather Channel, like there was a guy in like a hurricane or whatever, and he was pretending like the wind was really strong, and then two like college kids just like walked by nonchalantly in the background, and somebody linked that and said, maybe this is why we don't trust the Weather Channel. And it's like, it's true though, because if they're demonstrating a willingness to deliberately lie about something silly like that, why would you trust them? Right? But anyway, so that is an interesting one. But the other interesting takeaway is, like, of course, the Republicans score everything low, except for the Wall Street Journal, only like 28% or something of Republicans. And Fox News. But the interesting thing about this is that the highest trust that Republican voters have in an outlet is Fox News, and it's like 53%.
Yeah.
So that's the highest. It's barely over half of Republican voters trust even Fox News. Contrast that with the Democrat trust in the New York Times.
Or PBS.
Well, the New York Times, or PBS.
That's CNN. That high.
PBS.
And CNN.
And CNN. Oh, yeah. So Democrats voters trust PBS and CNN at a rate of 65%. So what does that tell you? Republicans, even for a right-wing outlet like Fox News, do not trust it. Barely over half of Republican voters trust Fox News, and that's the highest one. Most of these are below 30%.
MSNBC is the lowest. That's hilarious.
But Democrats, 65% at the top end.
Yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
Well, it is interesting because the left-wing outlets are always the ones that are saying Republicans trust Fox News too much.
Yeah.
Republicans regurgitate information, this, that, and the other thing. It's like, but they must not, actually. I mean, maybe they'll say a headline that they saw on Fox News, but then they'll probably parse it out like, I don't know about this, and I saw something else, and, they just mention it in passing, but I don't know that they ever believe it truly.
Yeah.
Because Fox News is not really right-wing so much.
I wonder, and I just want to mention this other one because it's an interesting data point. Breitbart's all the way at the bottom here, and only 25% of Republican voters trust Breitbart, and it's
that's so weird.
It's like 11% of Democrats. So it's like even Breitbart, which is an organization sort of tailored to the right wing, has even less trust from Republicans than Fox News.
Is the Daily Wire on here?
I do not believe so.
No, it's not.
That one would probably be pretty high, but I wonder if this says something about, because Republicans tend to be more freedom-oriented and individualistic. And so I wonder if that just makes Republicans naturally more likely to be skeptical, naturally more likely to trust their own intuition.
Probably.
Versus the Democrats, they seem to be much more trusting in authority. They seem much more likely to be willing to cede some of their individual sovereignty to an authority figure.
Right.
And you could see this play out over and over again from the COVID to whatever else, right? The experts, you have to trust the science. Like
Right.
they're always offloading their personal responsibility into a trusted authority figure.
Right.
And Republicans are much more likely to just say, no, frick all authority.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's captured in this graph really interestingly, you know, because the Republican trust doesn't go much higher than 50% ever in any of these outlets.
Right. It's Fox News and the Weather Channel have the highest trust ratings.
Yeah, true.
And it's not even that promising.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the Wall Street Journal one is so close.
That
like
is
they're
interesting.
both kind of like not trusting the Wall Street
They
Journal.
have, yeah, that seems to be like the lowest gap. Actually,
Yeah. Well,
Breitbart and
Bart
One American
or
News.
One American News, yeah.
But yeah.
But the Wall Street Journal, they're both closer to trusting versus not trusting.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas One American News and Breitbart, they're like closer to not trusting.
And of course, the lowest ratings among Republicans are CNN
What
and
does
MSNBC.
U.S. adult citizens mean? Just not voters?
Those are, yeah, so that would be, yeah, non-voters that are just classified as adult
Or
citizens.
are not registered with a party.
And the interesting
voters?
thing about that, too, is that the only one that breaks 50% is the Weather Channel among just all U.S. adult citizens, or
Right.
or whatever they're categorizing as U.S. adult citizens. Weather Channel is the only one that breaks 50%. Then there's only one more that breaks 40%, which is PBS. The rest of them are below 40. Isn't that
So
interesting?
it's really just registered Democrat voters that blindly trust.
Correct.
So it's not that high of a percentage of Americans.
It is, yeah, the takeaway
It's anyone
is...
in the cult.
Right. The takeaway is that only the left-wing people have a significant amount of trust in the corporate press. That's it.
Bizarre.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, I guess it kind of makes sense because all of those outlets are pandering to the left. I mean, they're basically preaching to the choir. So they were already going to peddle those talking points. And so they just kind of feed each other. It's a feedback loop.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a really interesting chart.
I like how he tweeted it.
Yeah.
Republicans trust the Weather
It is
Channel.
kind of funny how it's
What
like
did
only...
he say?
He said, let's see.
I gotta see this again. It's hard to stomach.
Yeah. The Republican skepticism regarding the Weather Channel is hard to stomach for a data guy like me.
That's funny.
I just think people are, I mean, Republicans are probably more likely to say, I don't need to watch the weather, I'll just see
I wonder
it.
what the source of this graph is.
It's YouGov.
YouGov? Oh.
Yeah. So it's a reputable pollster.
The Economist YouGov. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Huh.
Very interesting.
That is fascinating.
All right. Do you want to talk about Victorian death raves for our final story here?
It's disturbing.
Oh, is it?
It's disturbing.
Oh,
Do you want to end on it?
sure. Let's go.
Okay.
We're going to disturb you.
The New York Post headline: Dead rapper's body propped up in club for, quote, disrespectful public viewing. So if you know what a Victorian death photo is, that's basically where people would pose with their dead relatives for one last family picture after they died.
Okay.
Just, especially like children, just so they could be like, we had this child and we never got to take a family photo with them, but now they're dead, so we should. This is like modern day equivalent of it. Victorian death raves.
Wow.
So this opening, it was like hip hop equivalent of Weekend at Bernie's. Washington, D.C.'s Bliss nightclub has apologized over an appalling spectacle in which the body of slain rapper Gunu was reportedly displayed on their stage at his own funeral. The memorial service took place Sunday, weeks after the hip-hopper was shot dead at 24 years old.
Wow.
So the video that we're going to show you is...
Oh, is it going to actually have his body? Oh, yeah. Is it? All right. Well, warning to anyone who... I mean, it's just going to be like a funeral body, right? Like embalmed and whatnot.
Yeah, but...
All right. Well, warning to anyone that doesn't want to see this, but here we go. Let's take a look at what this... All right.
Here you go. That's him. It's like a wake, but a rave. And he's not laying down, he's propped up.
Wow, that was wild. Although, you know what? I have to say, this doesn't bother me all that much.
Doesn't it?
No, it's like, I mean, it is kind of weird, but people have been displaying the recently dead all the time, and so this is
just more fun.
This is just like a very specific cultural incarnation of that ancient ritual.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I guess his family was okay with it.
Yeah.
Because it was like how he would have wanted to go or whatever, like a big party.
Yeah. And
so I guess it's okay.
If everyone's there to honor him, like I'm sure there are traditional rules about how you're supposed to handle bodies, but if everyone's coming to celebrate the life of this guy, I'm not saying that he was a particularly good guy. If he's getting shot,
have no idea.
If he's getting shot in gang violence, he probably wasn't that great of a guy. But still, the cultural need to like say one last goodbye and to celebrate the dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if this particularly bothers me. It's not something that I would ever do with my,
and like Irish wakes are supposed to be like lively things too.
Yeah.
Like where there's a lot of drinking and partying, and it's just in the next room over because they're traditionally in somebody's house. So it's kind of the same thing. I think the biggest problem is that they rented a nightclub to do this, and the nightclub didn't know that this was going to happen. And so it's controversial because if it had just been at somebody's house, like a trap house or whatever, it probably wouldn't have been as big of a deal.
Yeah.
But I think it also is controversial because of how you're supposed to handle bodies and things like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to this probably.
Right.
Because I prefer if they're in a casket and I don't have to look at them if I don't want to.
Yeah.
But he's propped up on the stage, so like you can't avoid it. It just seems a little morbid.
Right.
But I guess if you're okay with it, then you're going to be in attendance, and if you're not, you just won't go.
Right. And it's like it's just a different context. I mean, people look at the dead all the time in weeks.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like
This made me think of, I don't know if you ever watched the show Bones.
No.
But there was an episode where a death metal band had acquired a real human skeleton and put it up on a cross, and they had it on the stage for their metal shows.
Wow. And they thought it was a prop.
And they thought it was a prop, but it turned out to be like one of the roadies or something. So it was somebody that they knew in the show, and it was his skeleton. And they were like a kind of band that would put like goat's blood all over themselves during the show, like really gory stuff, gore metal. And so they were like, yeah, skeleton, that'd be awesome. And then the Bones characters came in and were like, this was a murder, and everyone's like, oh my god, but this made me think of that because it was propped up on stage like he is.
Certainly wouldn't be the first time that a body was mistaken for a prop. That's actually happened.
Yeah, it happens all the time because human bones look fake for whatever reason. It's hard to discern that they're real.
Yeah. You know what else this reminds me of too, this video? There's like, I forgot what culture it is, but there's that one culture that like once a year actually brings out like the long dead family members. Like they're literally mummified.
I feel like that's something in South America.
But it's whatever it might be, but they bring them out of like the catacombs, and they like in the streets, they party, and they're like mummified, skeletonized, like ancient relatives. And they bring them out and they dress them up.
That's got to be Day of the Dead.
No,
right?
No, it's not that. I don't think it's that. I don't think Day of the Dead is that morbid where they're digging up long dead people.
Jesus.
They're like, they literally exhume people once a year and bring out their bodies and dress. It's really weird. But
that's ridiculous.
I think it's just like, you have this pattern in human culture where like this is kind of a recurring theme where you just display the dead.
Yeah, I guess this is just new. This is not something that we've done in American culture before.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we saw it again.
Right.
Like more rappers are like, that was awesome. I'm going to do that. But I probably wouldn't attend because rave lights and drinking don't seem to mix with the funeral. I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, that has been this episode of Take Your Medicine. I'm Jacob.
And I'm Sadie.
And be sure to check out all the links in the description wherever you're watching or listening. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks.